This is the Enjoyer Podcast. I'm your host, James Dixon.
I carry out today's podcast with a heavy heart. I regret to inform you that cancel culture is still alive and well in Michigan. Look, I'll be fine, but ultimately it's the kids who will suffer. It always is when adults make things about themselves. Let me begin at the beginning. When I heard that my old Detroit News colleague, Stephanie Steinberg, was putting on a summer journalism camp, I was excited. I've had many mentors over the years. I've been blessed to do so. People like Charlie LaDuff, John J. Miller at Hillsdale, Nolan Finley at the Detroit News. These are all people who helped guide my path as a young reporter. I was blessed and I was happy to sit under their learning tree, and I tried to collect all the fruit I could. In recent years, my own learning tree has started to bear fruit. I've been in this game since 2002 in college. It was years before I ever saw a penny in writing. By now, I'm 20-something years in. I know how to report. I know how to write. I know how to give a speech. I know how to do a TV hit or a radio hit or a podcast. I know how to build a social media following. And somehow I've done all of this as a black conservative with sharp elbows. Not exactly a sought-after cohort. After all these years and all these experiences, I'm eager to pass on what I know, just as so many people did for me who had no reason to invest in me or give me the time of day. So I called Stephanie and I asked if I could be a coach at her summer journalism camp. She agreed, and I was blessed to have that opportunity. When it's about the kids and not your own personal gratification, I'm 41. I am long past the point of seeking out personal gratification. There's just nothing there ultimately, and it's a journey you have to go on to learn that yourself. Some people get it super early. They know that at 17, 18, 19. Some people it takes us well into adulthood. So when you have a chance to work with kids, you reach out first. And when they tell you there's no money in the coaching budget, you just laugh because you came here to give, not to receive. Stop me if you've heard this before, but I believe the children are our future. When I pictured the kind of kid I might want to work with, no one person ever came to mind. Black or white, boy or girl, I don't really care. Kids are kids, and as kids, they're going to have a million questions. And anyone who knows me knows I love when people ask questions. Especially I love when people ask for my advice. I consider people's problems and their stories just fascinating. I'm a sucker for details, and I love to seek out solutions. I love what happens when two smart people put their heads together and think something through. But don't ever call me just to talk or just to vent or expecting a one-sided conversation. You can pull out the tape recorder and do that on Otter. Call me when you want to put heads together and find solutions to your problem. And so what I was hoping to find and hoping to help was the kid like me. I would help and would have helped any kid who came through the door. Again, kids are kids. But in my own little dream world, I was hoping to find that kid who doesn't stand apart just to be different. My kind of kid is the one who stands apart because they are different. They're 1 out of 8 billion souls, just the way God made them. Look, these are high school age kids who'd be at the camp. Their lives by now have been upended by COVID and by queer theory. The herd they travel with bleats so long and so loud that you can hardly perceive of a world beyond it. But even within that herd or embedded within it, it's not their choice where they go to school. There's kids out there who do stand up, who do speak out, who do talk back, who do push back against the spirit of the age, who do dare to think for themselves. And they don't bother to ask anyone's permission. There's a reason Donald Trump won among young adults. There's a reason Generation Z is so conservative, and it's what they call an equal and opposite reaction. And what they're reacting to and what they're reacting against is the very kind of feminized culture that would cancel a coach over mean tweets. Cancel culture is a product of the longhouse, the feminized longhouse. And at the longhouse, they can't handle the truth. So they sit around and they decide who gets to speak and who doesn't. And the only people who preach the approved narrative are allowed to speak. All of this makes me sad for the future, because if a coach like me isn't welcome at journalism summer camp, that means a kid like me wouldn't be welcome either. That's the thing behind the thing here. The good news is it won't work. Every teenager in Michigan by now has had a teacher who lost their mind to Trump derangement syndrome, queer theory, or an unfortunate cocktail of the two. They know what it sounds like when middle-aged women lose their minds over mean tweets. And to the extent they don't drown these women out entirely, they're drawn in the direction of what they're complaining about. Donald Trump? Better grab a MAGA hat. Joe Rogan? Who doesn't have 3 hours to burn listening to a podcast? J.D. Vance? Shoot, if he could go from Ohio State to the vice presidency, your son can damn sure go from Michigan to the presidency. Yet from the mouths of your son's teacher, these are the worst men who've ever lived. They could all learn a lot from a guy like Tim Walz, couldn't they? After all, only a toxic man would refuse to hum show tunes. Only a toxic man would refuse to kick his legs like a Radio City Rockette. From about age 7, your kids' teachers have been checking in about their pronouns. Your kid probably doesn't know what a pronoun is actually, or even how to use one in a sentence, but twice a semester a teacher might pull them aside, and in a hushed tone they might ask if anything has changed. By now, your kid has seen what happens when their friends do adopt queer pronouns. The teacher starts to treat them differently. As a kid who's still too young to realize that most of their teachers are probably losers, that attention from an adult means the world to them. These were the kids whose school doors were shuttered for COVID. If they played basketball at the park with a friend, the police might show up. And by the time school came back, if it came back, they were told that George Floyd had ascended to sainthood. George Floyd did not stay home and stay safe that day in Minneapolis, yet your teacher who wore a mask replaced the poster of Martin Luther King in her classroom with one of George Floyd. And the message there couldn't be clearer. If you want to be a heterosexual boy and win the respect of your teacher, all you got to do is take some fentanyl, pass a counterfeit 20, and wait to be turned into a hashtag. Then the same women who'd cross the street if you walk toward them can pretend to celebrate your memory. Maybe they'll even wear kente cloth and take a knee. Despite having every reason to go along, to get along, to bend the knee, to raise the fist, to say that men can get pregnant, there's a lot of kids who still didn't, who still won't, who still don't. And in this era, such a kid would be the rarest thing of all. An independent thinker, not a herd follower. A wolf in a generation of sheep. The kid who does not bend when the world demands it, that's the kid I was hoping to meet. That's the kid I was once upon a time. But I stood ready to help whoever came in the door tell whatever story they had to the best of their ability. I don't need a carbon copy of myself to give my guidance, and I've never met one. So I was excited to go. What I really hope to show the kids is what Frank Sinatra might tell them if he were here with us. You can do it your way. When you pray to God and ask Him to order your steps. When you study the techniques, the practices, and the history of your field. And when you share what you know with the world, that's how your people find you. That's when you're going to have the ability to do things your way and not the world's way. And your way, if your head is on straight, your way is really God's way, breathed through you and shared with the world. We are called by God to be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves, depending on the circumstance. Given the seriousness of these times and the seriousness of the communist threat, I'm not at all shy about showing the fangs. If you're standing in my public square and you don't want to get bit, you better tell the truth. So I figured I was a known commodity. Stephanie and I used to work together at the Detroit News. I didn't just, between April 1st and now, develop a Twitter account and start speaking out. It's been kind of a thing for years. But then the other day I get a call from Stephanie, months from the program. And let me just tell you something. Anytime a woman texts you saying you need to talk, you already know what's about to happen. Nobody ever sends that text as a preface to tell you, hey, we found some more money in the budget. Good news historically is blurted out, bad news is telegraphed. After announcing my participation as a coach, Stephanie said she heard from concerned members of the community. They were concerned about my tweets, if you could imagine it. At this point, I don't even bother asking which tweets because it doesn't matter which tweets. Is it the ones where I pointed out the biblical standard of sex? That there is no such thing as trans? Male and female, he created them? That if it's good enough for God, it's good enough for me? Or maybe it's the tweets where I pointed out that abortion is murder. And in the case of my community, the black community, it's genocide. Maybe it's when I pointed out that black women are about 14% of the women in Michigan, but have 50% of the abortions. Yet when you see abortion portrayed on a billboard or talked about on a TV commercial, it's always a white woman who's the face of it. I can see how the truth of the matter is cramping the style of your eugenics campaign, and I offer no apologies. In a state where 30,000 babies are murdered annually in the womb and half of them are black, the likes of Planned Parenthood and Gretchen Whitmer are responsible for more black deaths in 1 year than the KKK was throughout its entire history. Maybe it's the tweets where I noted that women have had suffrage. They've had the right to vote for a century, and somehow we still haven't had the first woman president. Is it because maybe they aborted the woman who had the grit to be president someday? Or is it because that grit is weeded out by society? That it's nurture, not nature, that's the problem holding women back? What if I told you that the same feminism that got you the right to vote is what keeps you out of the big chair, the presidency? When we talk about DEI and affirmative action before it, what we're really talking about is partiality. Treating people differently, not based on behaviors and track records, which indicate their differences, but based on traits given from God. Women have benefited from the DEI mindset, but now, this close to the presidency, find themselves crippled by it. Here's some real talk, ladies. In the 21st century, it's not a glass ceiling that women face. It's a pink ceiling. Women have gotten so good at nagging their way into what they want that they've developed a fatal flaw. And there's no better example of this than Kamala Harris. 30 years ago, Kamala Harris's only qualification for anything is that she was a powerful man's girlfriend, Willie Brown, in San Francisco. From there, without having accomplished anything, Harris rose to U.S. Senator and then to the vice presidency. But the way she got it is the same way she lost it. After George Floyd died, Joe Biden didn't just want a woman as his running mate, he wanted a black woman. That left him with about 3 options, and none of them were good. He could go with Stacey Abrams, who is not remotely attractive. He could go with someone like Michelle Obama, who hasn't smiled in 15 years. Or he could take a political veteran like Kamala Harris, who also photographed well. At least in theory, at least if you didn't look too closely and see that turkey neck there. Biden chose Harris, and overnight, the first Indian U.S. senator was transformed into the first black woman vice president. But it was never true. Kamala Harris was raised by an Indian woman. Her middle name is Devi. Her dad was a sperm donor at best. The only black culture she knows about came from A Different World reruns and enrolling at a black college. At no point was, is, or will Kamala Harris be a black woman. That was fake from the beginning. Kamala Harris was a trans black, and I suppose now I'll be canceled for saying that too. The vice presidency is one heartbeat away from leadership of the free world. But with Kamala Harris, it always felt like it was more than that. With 4 years of nothing to do but run for president, Harris let herself become a sideshow. She spent more time polishing a black accent for BET appearances than she did drying herself out to make a presentable showing to voters. When her moment did come, Harris was too lazy to do anything with it. Donald Trump had been running for president since 2015. Last year, at age 78, he was not remotely tired. Kamala Harris, at 60, didn't have enough gas in the tank for 100 days of campaigning. All Harris was, all she ever was A, a man's girlfriend to begin with, and B, just black enough, just enough black dust on her to be appointed to the second highest office in the land. But because she was picked for DEI purposes, Harris didn't have the skills or the grit to seriously compete for the top spot. Really, you could say that the second Joe Biden picked Kamala Harris in 2020, he booked a loss in 2024. Had Harris won the presidency, my cancellation from a summer camp coaching opportunity wouldn't be a vestigial tale of a much dumber era just waiting to be snipped off. It would be official policy of the U.S. government. Anyone who'd ever sent a mean tweet is canceled. And this will be decided by a committee of girl bosses who don't need no man. So yeah, as I sit here, I feel bad for the kids who miss out, but I'm not really worried for the young wolf out there. I wasn't made at a summer camp, and you won't be either. But it sure would have been nice. Mostly, though, I feel bad for the people who carried out this little whisper campaign. Guys, check the calendar. It's 2025. Your team has lost the presidency, the House, the Senate, and you're about to lose all of Michigan next year. If getting an unpaid coach kicked out of a 2-day appearance at a summer camp qualifies as a win, you're not winning. You're losing. And you just tipped your hand. You just showed me on the timeline where the mean tweet hurt you. Telling me you fear my voice and believe it would spread if young people heard it was the exact wrong message to send me. You guys won't buy the billboards. You don't have the balls. But I just might, because I know that's what you fear most. If I am the bad guy you proclaim, go raise money off this. Send this podcast out. Put up billboards with my face. Warn the impressionable minds of Metro Detroit to stay far away from James Dixon and the Enjoyer podcast. Tell them I swear sometimes. Tell them I'm a heterosexual man who finds women attractive and feels comfortable saying so. Tell them that wherever I go, there will be no feminism. Now, why do I feel comfortable saying that? Because I say it knowing you can't and won't buy that billboard. Because the devil only works in the shadows. When he has to step into the light, he doesn't do so well. So you won't see a billboard, because if you were to speak my name, more people would speak the name of the God who sent me. So these weak little whisper campaigns are your only hope. What you may not know is that you can't cancel a man with a live mic and a relationship with his people. This is one of those I'm rubber, you're glue scenarios like when we were kids. The more you whisper about me, the more people will fear the God who sent me. So yeah, I'm sad for the kids. They'll miss out. But I'm really sad for the people who would try to cancel me. It's early days to show this level of desperation. It's not 2018 anymore, guys. You can't avoid me forever. You will have to meet me on the battlefield of ideas someday. That's the scenario you fear most. And I know this because you just told me. And canceling me, you've actually lighted the path for my next move. What you've told me is you can't handle the truth. And so your best hope is to avoid it entirely, to avoid any scenario where you and it, or me and you, coexist. So we won't coexist. We'll do battle instead. Hope you folks like fighting, because I love it.